Bucknutters, welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, March 20th, 2017. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. Patrick, spring ball, of course, resumes for Ohio State Tuesday morning. We will be there covering it. The first hour of practice will be open to the media, and then we will interview Urban Meyer afterward. My question for you is, obviously the Buckeyes were off last week due to spring break. They had two practices the previous week. From those practices that we saw and from what you heard, what stood out to you the most from the first week of spring ball, Patrick?
I think the most notable thing was that the veterans, and we kind of touched on this during that week, that the veterans are kind of getting the first look at the open spots, guys that are returning, typically guys that played at least some last year. I think the most notable one is at cornerback, and probably some at wide receiver as well. I think that there's going to be the opportunity for the younger guys, and I think there probably was some last week, for the younger guys to step in and really show that they can seize these spots. And even, we talk about cornerback. Kendall Sheffield's not a younger guy, but he's a new guy. But, Damon Arnett, it appeared that Damon Arnett was ahead of him, I guess. Same with wide receivers. We're seeing Paris Campbell, Johnny Dixon, Terry McLaurin going ahead of the guys like Austin Mack, Benjamin Victor, those type of guys. But I don't think that necessarily is an indication of what is to come as we get further in the spring, or, as we head in the fall. But it is interesting, giving those guys the first reps, letting them show what they can do, and then kind of working the young guys in, I guess, would be a way to put it.
What's your take on Demetrius Knox? That seems to be one that a lot of people are not buying, but maybe we're too quick to write him off. I don't know. He's a fourth-year junior. He was very highly recruited. He's been banged up during his Ohio State career. I think a lot of people look at, he didn't play that well when he came in against Clemson. Well, I think that would have been tough sledding for any offensive lineman coming in that situation. Just your take on Demetrius Knox, and if you think he's going to keep that job.
Yeah, that's another one in that position where I think some people assume, as you said, that maybe he's just getting the benefit of the doubt because he's a returning guy. As you mentioned, he was very highly recruited, hasn't been entirely healthy during his Ohio State career, so we haven't seen enough to judge, and it's so hard with offensive linemen because they come in, most of them, regardless of how highly recruited they were bigger than everyone they played against. Now all of a sudden you're going against guys that are your size and know how to get around you or get through you or however the case may be. So, it typically takes these guys a couple of years, and we've seen Michael Jordan recently and some other guys come in and play fairly young. But, this is a guy who's had a chance to kind of grow up within the system and learn how, college football, Ohio State football wants to be played and how you play it on the offensive line. So, I'm interested to take a look at him. Obviously, Malcolm Prigion's a name that people are excited about just because he's a junior college transfer and had some hype behind him last year. But again, this was a highly recruited guy who they were very big on when he came in. So, I think at least having him out there, getting a chance, it motivates other guys. It pushes him. So I think it'll be a good thing. I'll be interested to see if he can hang on to it. So.
I want to talk a little bit about Mike Weber and the running back situation for the Buckeyes. A two-part question. How good do you think Mike Weber can be, and do you think any of the other running backs like J.K. Dobbins, Demario McCall, or Antonio Williams could perhaps push him for the starting job?
Yeah, I think it's an unfortunate situation for Mike because he followed Ezekiel Elliott, and so he's forever going to be compared to Ezekiel Elliott in terms of what they do on the field, and they're not the same type of guys. I mean, we've seen Mike have some very good runs. He just doesn't have that breakaway speed that Zeke had that made Zeke so good. I mean, Zeke was, I don't know if it's world-class speed. I'm not sure if we can categorize that, but for football, it was up there. And, Mike's fast. I mean, he certainly is. You look at his year last year and the production he had, over 1,000 yards as a freshman, which, just a couple years ago we were talking about Urban Meyer never having a 1,000-yard back. Now he's had 3 in a row. 9 touchdowns is solid. Multiple 100-yard games. I think had he finished the season a little bit better, we're not having this conversation because, 16 total carries in the last 2 games, fumbles twice against Clemson, did have a touchdown against Michigan, but, just not the production that I think people wanted to see as the season closed. I do think he'll be fine. I don't know if he is demands as many touches as Ezekiel Elliott, especially if the guys behind him are as talented as we think they are. J.K. Dobbins is a guy who's certainly popped, I think, early. I think had Mike Weber been healthy, he probably would have gotten touches his freshman year, so it wouldn't surprise me if they try and get him out there. Williams is another one that I will be interested to see. He sounded very confident when we talked to him out in Arizona before the Fiesta Bowl. So, I think a stable of running backs could be a good thing for Ohio State, but I do think Mike Weber is very talented. I just think he's, forever going to be compared to Ezekiel Elliott, and Ezekiel Elliott was one of the best to do it at Ohio State, both just what you saw on the field and the pure numbers that he put up.
I'm pretty high on McCall, but I think he's going to be the starting H-back. And I know they can move him around. He played running back last year. I'm sure they'll move him around this year. I'm really high on him. I'm pretty high on J.K. Dobbins, too. I need to see him in real college game action, but just from his high school film against top competition, I mean, it is lights out good. So I tend to think there's going to be, some competition there, but I'll be surprised if Mike Weber loses that starting job. It's going to be interesting to see what Kevin Wilson has to say about all that. The first time we got to talk to Kevin Wilson, we didn't get to ask too much about the running back. There was a lot of other questions being asked, but maybe next time we'll get a chance to ask him about the running backs. But, as you said, it's a lot of competition, good problem to have for the Buckeyes. And you make a good point, too, I think, that Weber following Ezekiel Elliott, that's tough. It's like a coach following a legend. You never want to be the one to follow the legend. So we'll see what happens there, but some good guys going after that job. I want to close the show talking about some basketball, but not Ohio State men's basketball. Ohio State women's basketball. Some positive talk about Ohio State basketball this year for a change. The women got the job done last night. They upset Kentucky at Kentucky 82-68. Move on to the Sweet 16. They will play number 1 seeded Notre Dame, who beat Purdue in overtime last night, 88-82. So I think Notre Dame, even though they're a 1 seed, maybe Ohio State can knock them off. They're certainly not UConn, so that's good. The Buckeyes will play the Fighting Irish Friday night, either at 7 or 9:30. I know you did a story for the site last night, Patrick. Big win for the I know they don't like being called the Lady Bucks. I'll just call them the Buckeyes. Big win for the Buckeyes, 82-68. Another big night for Kelsey Mitchell. Just talk about that game, if you would, please.
Yeah, it's a fun one, and, I've been paying more and more attention to this team. I tried to watch them throughout the year, or at least keep up on how they're doing and talk to some of the guys that cover them. And, if you haven't gotten on this bandwagon, this is a fun team to watch, especially with the men not playing this time of year. They play fast, they play exciting. It's all in all, a good brand of basketball. Obviously, women's basketball is different than men's, but I thoroughly recommend people tuning into these games. They're on ESPN, so it's not like they're hard to find, kind of like some of the men's games we're seeing right now. But anyway, yes, the Kentucky game was good. I think the biggest story was Kelsey Mitchell came into this game having shot pretty poorly. She's not only the star of the Buckeyes, but the star of, the women's world right now. People are very high on her, and she had a really good start to the game, hit a three-pointer just, I think, like 5 seconds into the game to get going. Finished with 21 points. She had 19 in the first half, and Kentucky really focused on her. And so they had to kind of turn to some other weapons. Kentucky went on a big run. And the rest of the girls stepped up, which was impressive to see. I mean, they've done that throughout the season when Kelsey struggled, but in a tournament setting like that, sometimes if your star player gets shut down, it can really hurt the team, and you had some girls step up, and then make some big plays. And Lene Harper, a girl who played for Kentucky for 2 years, transferred to Ohio State, sat out last year, playing in Kentucky's arena against Kentucky, had a very big game, almost a triple-double, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. So, it was kind of cool to see that, going against, a former roommate, girls she played with. So, a cool story there, and the Buckeyes get an 82-68 win, move on, as you said, to play Notre Dame. And, I think aside from UConn, if the Buckeyes continue to play well and are hot, there's not a team that you're really that scared of, going forward. I haven't watched the women's game that closely this year, but I'm talking to other people, it seems to be that this is a team that could really make a run if they can keep going, and if Kelsey Mitchell especially can do well. She's a special player and can kind of carry the team, and certainly did so yesterday, especially in the first half.
Great stuff as always from Patrick Murphy. I really appreciate it, Patrick. And just a reminder again, Ohio State's spring football practice resumes tomorrow morning. Patrick, Steve Hellwagon, and I will all be there covering it. We'll have a practice report. We'll have videos. We will have a story on what Urban Meyer has to say and a video on what Urban Meyer has to say. And we'll have sidebars, just interesting things, little quick things we can tell you about what Urban Meyer has to say. So keep it locked to Bucknuts for coverage of all of that tomorrow morning and throughout the afternoon. And thanks again to Patrick Murphy, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it and hope you have a great day. Let's hear some Buckeye swag. Best damn band in the land.